scale. It's okay. We're about to leap deeply into a chaos episode because once again, this is my brain on ADHD with a sprinkle of menopause, so that the ADHD is basically seeding ADHD babies in the lawn out there, and I'm like, I don't even know.
I had a vision of gremlins when you get the
Yeah,
water
I'm
on
just
them, and
like,
they're
as I go, like, isn't there a demon that just like as it passes, it like drops like little demon baby replicas?
I'm sure there
Just
is.
like, okay. Welcome to Murder of Crows. We are three Gen X women who are talking about life in the patriarchy, and we're looking at it through a feminist intersectional lens. I'm your host today, Jen.
I'm Sabrina.
And I'm Corey.
Thank you for your patience. For those of you who don't know, I am a nightmare, and these beautiful women are terribly patient with me, and I am always the hot mess at the party. So here I come. But I'm an enthusiastic hot mess. So today I am presenting the history and politics of women's fashion. So it's a little hybrid because I really want to focus on the politics of it. But of course, there's a whole bunch of history and why women wear the clothes that we do, deeply embedded in the patriarchy. I do want to start by saying that this is going to be a Western focus, right? So I'm not looking at women in the Middle East or Asia. Obviously, we're going to be looking at sort of North America and European fashion trends that were heavily influencing North American fashion trends. And also I'm starting kind of 1800s-ish when there was a more broadly circulated media, newspapers and stuff that would influence how women dressed.
And everything was uncomfortable.
Yeah, everything was uncomfortable. But it's women, so it's fine. They can suck it up.
So, very restricting, all of it.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think?
I like it. Off kilter, on point. I like it.
Guys, what does that mean?
No, seriously, what
So big shocker. 1800s, female fashion was generally very uncomfortable and unhealthy. So, and very inconvenient, right? So it was not designed for us to be movable, walkable. So, of course, fashion changed. Sometimes there was lots of layers and sometimes there was less layers and sometimes they were high-waisted and low-waisted and whatever. But if we think of that traditional sort of full-skirted woman from the 1800s wearing a corset, various levels of billowing lace and fabric, those skirts, just the skirts alone, often weighed up to 30 pounds.
Ooh.
So, and they would just be tied and hanging off your hips. Like, can you imagine 30 pounds? Because they wouldn't necessarily even be hanging from your shoulders. Like sometimes there would be like an undergarment that would hang on and then you'd put the corset over top. But the skirts were quite often layered on and tied on, sometimes individually in layers.
Yeah, and they'd have like a metal hoop under them too, like a...
Well, yeah, so there was hoop skirts and there were bustles and there were various different fashions. But initially what it was, so one of the things with the hoop skirt was to get the silhouette of that full skirt, but without all the fabric. So at first it was layers and layers and layers of fabric to give you that full silhouette, right? It's always about the silhouette. Okay. So also just think like walking down the street in the rain, like just imagine the mud. There's no concrete, there's no cement, like everything's dirt streets. And most of the time women had either little leather or silk slippers. So they didn't have great footwear. And like, I don't know, for anybody who's worn like their pants are too long and the hem is catching in the ground, or you wear a long skirt or something, the moisture just wicks up, right? And it travels up the clothing. So women in the winter would be getting chilled. It's already 30 pounds. Now it's wet. Now it's hanging off of you and it's cold and damp.
So this is like the upper class, right? This is what the upper class women would be wearing. So their outside engagement is a little bit more minimal, I guess.
Yes, that's fair. Yeah. But they would go on walking visits and do their like shopping and, go for like, because the other thing was the only exercise they would get would be like strolls in the park. So, or strolls in the garden.
They're carrying 30 pounds of bustles, so.
Right? I'm like,
and
I bet you those women were secretly jacked. Like they were just
like ripped.
Whoa, doing their crunchies every day just to be able to get in their dresses.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
So how long would it take to get dressed in the morning wearing that?
Well, this is why they needed servants, right? Like you needed to have a lady's maid to get you dressed, because how would you do that on your own? Even like tying your corset or all the buttons running down the back of your dress, like you couldn't do that by yourself. There's no way. But even poor women, they wore less layers, obviously, because they needed a practicality of movement. But still, the expectation was long covered skirts. So they were probably just walking around in dance skirts all the time and didn't have as many options to come home and change into, right? So those long, heavy skirts were, deeply impractical. And of course, like you had to go past your ankle because that was for decency, right? Like you couldn't be showing, even like the turn of a foot was considered, like indecent.
The flash of an ankle.
Risque.
Yeah,
Risky.
clutch my pearls. There's also, so as Sabrina mentioned, bustles and hoop skirts, bustles more so were for the silhouette of the rounded bum, right? We're trying to get the big bum look. That's the, the Brazilian butt lift of its era, right? The Kardashians would be all full bustle.
Way less invasive.
But the hoop skirts, again, it was just to make that beautiful silhouette, right? So you wanted a really like hourglass figure, tight corset, full skirt. But imagine trying to walk through a door or sit in a carriage or anything like with those. So like women would be actually like knocking people into the streets because you can't walk down the street with your friend when your skirt is 10 feet wide, right? You're just like, yeah, how are you doing, Lisa? Tell me about your weekend.
But I imagine they had a bit of like a slinky construction to them, so you could just like pull them out, compress them, and flatten them out or something to get through a tight squeeze.
I mean, they must have had some flexibility. They must have, because they sat in carriages and stuff. But I mean, like like skirts and corsets had boning, which was literally strips of bone, right? So I'm like, is
it's
that
literal?
what
I didn't know
they
that.
used was like for the hoops? I'm assuming it was probably some sort of wood frame because, like you think, they don't have plastic, right? Like, so it would have had to have been some firm type of strapping material. Anyway, could have been metal, could have been wood, could have been bone.
Interesting.
So it would have
Bones
been
from
like,
what?
they would use whale bone.
Whale bone.
I'm sure they used other things.
Hey.
And now I'm going to speak out of turn. I should probably look that up because it's called whalebone and maybe it was actually from another animal. But I'm assuming it was actually a whale. They're large enough, right? A large enough animal.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And they would have been, especially in England, right?
Yeah.
You're a seafaring country.
Wild.
Stands to reason.
So yeah, not practical for getting around. You can't like move around the streets. You can't get through doors. Sitting down for tea must have been just a nightmare. You need the largest seats in the world to try and like, if you met bustles, you're like,
So
I'm just going to perch right on the edge of the seat.
What about stools? All they have to do is like pull that business up, plunk down on it, and
you're like, I know I need to stay covered, but I am going to yank my skirts over my head for a second while I sit on the stool. Just a second.
Just like when you're a little kid pulling up your skirt and then pulling up your pantyhose.
It'd be so good. All these women, super decorous, very proper, and then just like bloomers showing. So good.
But you know, when like you see people in that era they go for promenades with their partner, and you always see just a woman and a man walking together, and that's probably why there wasn't room for more than that, right? To walk through the garden.
Two women
path.
walking, you wouldn't. How would you talk to each other? Like literally, you'd be like, well, and heaven forbid there's 3 or 4 of us. They'd be like, how is Susie doing back there? You can't walk side by side. Fashion was a nightmare. And of course, so the number one culprit for the fashion police at the time that was actually very widely criticized was the corset, right? Because the corset would compress the organs. It would sometimes deform the hips and deform the rib cage. It would make childbirth later on really difficult because you've now crushed your pelvis. But the need for a tiny waist was really paramount. And also for women that started wearing them at a really young age, and you've screwed up your skeletal structure, sometimes they actually kind of needed the corset for support, right? Because they've messed up all of those muscles and those structures that are supposed to be holding your organs in. Yeah, and girls would start wearing them at like 12, 13 years old.
Be
I
so
wonder if this
painful.
contributed to shorter lifespans too.
Yeah.
Certainly with childbirth too, all the complications that came with childbirth. I imagine if you've had your organs compressed so tightly, that would impact the death rate in childbirth.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. You know what? I want to do a whole episode on childbirth in the 1800s. It was wild and like midwifery, but the
That's
problems that
gory.
women encountered
Yeah.
were staggering because of that. You know, one of the things that I talk about with my students when we look at the Industrial Revolution was what they call pony girls, which are not the like sex kink that they are now. Back then, they were girls that would be in charge of carrying coal in the mines. And so they would have a coal cart and they would be harnessed on their hips. So they would like crawl and drag the coal cart using their hips up the hills and
Hmm.
back like donkeys or ponies would, right? And that those coal carts were so heavy they would absolutely crush their pelvic. So like even in the
Hmm.
lower classes, because corsets are particularly upper class women, which is also one of those reasons lots of children becomes an indication of being lower class because
Hmm.
upper class women mostly couldn't survive childbirth or had difficulty carrying pregnancies. It became much more
Hmm.
complicated because they were crushing themselves or wearing the corset while pregnant, right?
That's
That's
horrible.
crazy.
I know you think about like how wild that and how uncomfortable. Like anybody who's
Did
been
they? They
pregnant,
actually wore them while pregnant? I guess to a certain point, and once they,
yeah, yeah, that's just it. It's
yeah,
like at some point they would be kind of basically then you're in your confinement, so then
yeah,
you can't leave your house, you can't be as seen out in public because you're no longer sort of respectable. You're now in a delicate condition.
because your silhouette was horrible.
Yes, who wants to see that fat lady? Ew. And so they would they would be confined. So like I can see for
Yeah.
women, if you can squeeze into your corset, you can still go out and talk to your friends, you can still go shopping, you can still go for walks. Otherwise you're just stuck in your house. I'd probably
Oh
squish myself
man.
into a corset too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
kidding.
So like
Crazy. Yeah,
the
that'd be so
restriction.
awful.
It was, yeah, it was really rough. And there was all sorts of people. There were like doctors and educators and advocates that really were pushing for the removal of the corset. But of course, fashion and social trends dictated it. As we know for ourselves to this day, health never dictates what people do.
Hmm.
You know, like if we did what was good for us, we wouldn't do half of the stuff, half the beauty trends that hit the market and are super popular would never make it,
Yeah.
right? Even though it was
Mm.
very well understood, even in the early 1800s, that corsets were very damaging and women shouldn't be wearing them, that fashion persisted. And women, of course, were
Hmm.
culpable in that they wanted to look whatever the part of a beautiful woman was that the society
Yeah.
dictates.
The
Hmm.
desire to be desirable.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, also when your entire value is in your ability to catch a spouse, right? And your ability
Yeah.
to
Hmm.
Your
be,
survival at times
yeah,
is in the ability to catch a spouse.
yeah, exactly. Like you have no future if you can't get
Yeah.
yourself married, right?
Score.
That's true.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I thought interesting was during the Civil War, and we're going to circle back to it a little bit, but during the Civil War in America, especially in the South, there was a real press for women to keep up morale, right? So they became responsible for the morale on the home front. And so one of the things that they were told is like, even though you're in mourning, you're not to wear black. You have to wear light, bright colors. You have to sort of encourage people to turn away from the fact that everyone's dying and we have to be celebratory and spring like. So women were encouraged to wear colors and to go out and be seen, even though some of them have lost like their husbands, their sons, like they're supposed to be going
Because
out
they're
and like
decorations.
looking, yeah, and fully wearing their like party clothes in light sunny colors, and that was a contribution to the war effort. And I was like,
Mm.
so wild.
Gosh.
And some of those women in the South, one of the complications for those women was that they're expected to sort of do this part. And this is specifically upper class women in the South. Many of them were the wives of plantation owners.
Hmm.
Their husbands go to war. And a lot of the men that worked on the farm and the people who managed the slaves on the farm went to war too. And so this leaves women in charge of a plantation and managing the slaves, which would have been, you know, like that was a very violent and scary job, usually
Hmm.
to keep people enslaved in
Yeah.
and working on your
Hmm.
property. That would have been a very difficult job. I mean, I'm not saying that it's a job that, you know, obviously it's bloody barbaric and horrible. And I don't have sympathy for the fact that they had to maintain their slaves. But if their livelihoods, they have this plantation that they're supposed to like run. Of course, many of the slaves escaped, which good for them. So the enslaved people would leave. And then the women are left with a plantation with nobody to work it, no way to run it. And they're trying to keep their house afloat. Their husbands are off at war. And so thinking about the clothing that they would have had to wear at the time. So they're still like wearing these big heavy dresses and somehow, I don't know, bring in the cotton, you know, like who's staying on board to help them do this. So
but did they really at that point, or did they drop some of the? I'm sure
that like there are multiple things that happened. There were some pretty evil, sadistic women that took up the reins of like disciplining enslaved people with glee. There were kind women who I'm sure lost many of their enslaved laborers, but were maybe able to keep some from like either a sense of loyalty or nowhere else to go, or many of the enslaved people have debilitating injuries deliberately so they can't run away. So they would like cut their Achilles tendons to make sure that they couldn't run away. That sort of stuff. So if they have enslaved people on their property that are injured in that way, it might be safer and wiser for them to just stay loyal to the slave owner and the enslaver, and you have a roof over your head and you have food, and or if they're elderly, right? If there's people that might have chosen to stay in bondage just for safety, right? Rather than risk fleeing and getting caught up by, slave runners and people that were trying to catch them, and then who knows what happens to them, right? And then there were women that just picked up a shovel and did what they could themselves. And then of course there was the other option of just probably sitting quietly in your plantation and drinking laudanum into the afternoon and watching everything fall apart around you, which might have been my choice. I might have been like, well, okay, I'm just, I guess, decaying plantation. That's my look right now.
I'm going to ditch the dress and
anyway. I'm going to look pretty. Gosh, I look pretty, and everything's falling down around me. So I didn't mean to go into a plantation, but it is like an interesting thing to me, that responsibility of morale and like maintaining home front contribution to the war effort, right? In the late 1800s, so sometimes I'll say 19th century, sometimes I'll say 18th century. I just know from my students that confuses people. So 19th century means the 1800s, 18th century means the 1700s, right? So it's always like we're in the 21st century, even though our numbers are 2 zeros, right? So so just keep that in mind. But so late 1800s, so the late 19th century, there was what we call the rational dress movement. And so this was a real push from women to be like, it's not practical. And it was stemmed partly by a little bit of more democratic access to certain sports. So cycling, bikes were a new invention, and women wanted to be able to bike. There was ice skating, cricket, gardening, even swimming. Like these were sort of like becoming accessible activities for women, and they couldn't do them in their big heavy skirts, right? So the rational dress movement was just about practical clothing, like clothing that they could sort of move in. So, and this was one of those movements that kind of happened serendipitously, simultaneously in like England, in many countries in Europe, in North America. I think women at the same time, all of these cultural events are happening. Bicycles are invented. Everybody wants to access it. Women all over the world are having the same problems, or all over Western nations are having the same problems cycling. So it was launched, I think, in 1881 in London was the Rational Dress Society. So they really pushed for this reform. And so the focus was healthy, comfortable, practical. Those were the 3 points of the movement. So there was one fashion that was the bloomer. Now, like I will sometimes refer to bloomers as those like ruffly pants that we would wear under skirts, that women would wear under skirts.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that the bloomer was actually named after a woman who ran a newspaper. Her name was Amelia Bloomer. And the reason why those came about was they were essentially knickerbockers, which were like sort of billowy pants that buttoned at the knee. And so women would wear these bloomer pants. At the time, I think originally they were down to the ankle. They were but a loose billowy pant that kind of buttoned. And then they would wear a short skirt over it. So they were still wearing their skirt, but the skirt stopped around the calf or the knee, and then they had these pants underneath. So they were still like covering propriety, but they could move around, they could access, they could bend down. They weren't weighed down by the weight of the skirt.
That must have been so liberating.
Right? Pictures I
Yeah.
wanted to show
Can you
you guys.
imagine?
And yeah. Just being able to wear kind of pants like a man, like the freedom of that.
Uh-huh.
Woo.
Yeah. Huge. Like,
Right?
look at me, I'm lunging.
Yeah.
I'm
Reminds me
lunging.
when I got my like Lululemon dress pants and all I did.
So
They're
funny.
6-packs. They're all like, oh.
Yeah.
I got Lululemon dress pants and I was like, they're like leggings, but they look like a dress pant. And I would just like walk down the halls and I'm like, gee, I'm lunging. I would do like, like lunges down the hall because I'm like, I can move in my dress pants. So I also love that Amelia Bloomer was a newspaper woman. So to be clear, she wasn't the one who invented these pants, but she really liked them and promoted them in her newspaper, which was why they were called the Bloomers. And they were picked up by a lot of the suffragettes, right? The women who were trying to get the vote. And they liked it. They didn't really catch on. So it was a try. It didn't really work. They were mocked. So a lot of them wore them for kind of a couple of years and just got soundly made fun of. And so at some point they just kind of took off the pants and went back to
Who was making fun of them?
back to
Men
their
or other
skirts.
women?
Darn.
I think both. So,
Both.
women, we are guilty of
Yeah.
repressing our own selves, right? Yeah, it was definitely like a mockery. Also, the suffragettes were, you sort of think of them now as like kind of lunatic political activists, right? At the time, like they were very outspoken and very bold and really pushing norms of society.
Yeah.
So they were kind of targets in that way, like unless like even women who might have embraced their ideas would have been like, okay, I'm not going to go out on the street and hang with them though, because I don't want to be, painted
little
with the
too
same
edgy.
brush as them, right? So it didn't catch on, but
Not yet.
yet. So, but the idea of pants had kind of been broached. Now, one of the big drivers that we always see as a factor in social change is technology, right? Advancements in technology change. So like as the Industrial Revolution is rolling in, women are working in factories. So this is a lower class kind of change. Didn't filter into the upper classes so much, but I find changes are happening in these little sections at some point to, it starts to permeate, right? So women that were working in factories,
Gains momentum.
a lot of them, like you've got like, it's very hot. It's very crowded. Lots of machinery that is super dangerous. So you couldn't have a lot of loose fabric. So they would have like sleeveless blouses. They would have really slim skirts. They would have sometimes, like depending on the factory labor that you were doing, you would wear pants, because if they got caught up in the fabric, there were no safety switches. They would just like get an arm ripped off, or they would just choke and die, right? Like they would get strangled and die. And
Can you imagine the workplace injuries?
Oh my God, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Talk about trauma.
I know. And sometimes they were charged for getting blood on like the fabric that they were, weaving. And you're like,
man,
like,
sorry
I
about
didn't
your
need that
fingers,
arm.
but
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So bad.
Crazy.
But so those factories were places where you started to see fashion reform, just because it was super impractical to be like, you couldn't dress well in those areas. So they would also let like women wear shorter skirts, right? So like mid calf or something, so they had a little bit of movement on their legs. So the Civil War, we talked about them taking over the plantation. I have that note twice. So World War I. World War I is where we actually start to see a little bit of like women as laborers. So of course we have like in for like upper class women, right, where it's becoming socially acceptable. So we've got, again, the men on the home front, they're leaving. And this time women are taking over factory jobs as part of their patriotic duties. So they would be collecting things and, bottle drives or whatever, trying to like collect resources. They were cooking for the troops. They would be knitting socks They would be, like sending all sorts of supplies over. That was part of their sort of home front obligations. But of course, with the scarcity of rations and material, women, like those big billowy skirts started to fall by the wayside. That wasn't practical. They needed all of their fabric and resources for the soldiers and for materials for the war effort. So everything was about minimizing. So then we start seeing some like smaller silhouettes, and also a little bit of the like soldiers' jackets that, like that kind of like mimicking the male attire. So when they come home, we hit the 1920s, which is like a wild fashion reform, right? We've got the roaring 20s. And again, so we've got this, like, women have been like getting rid of fabric and getting rid of the corsets and getting rid of some of the layers because of restricted access to economic resources. And then all of a sudden they're like, you know what feels awesome? Not wearing a corset. That's pretty amazing. And they don't want to get put back in the box. They're like, hell no, this is the life, actually freedom. So we've got this freedom, rebellion, flapper, those straight silhouette dresses with no bust, no hips. It was like a complete defiance of that hourglass silhouette. And so like flappers were very
but they're still strapped in though. That's the problem, hey?
Oh yeah, I know, because of course, like all fashion, that doesn't a large busted, full hipped woman is not going to fit in a flapper dress and that sleek silhouette. So she's going to be doing stuff to compress, bind, get it all squished down.
Yeah.
But isn't it great how they matched fashion to the food shortage? Women were, there wasn't as much food, slimming down naturally. So like, let's make that a thing.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly it. And I wonder if it was deliberate or if it was like, because women were just thinner. And then there's still obviously going to be some fashion icons that are knowing how to spin it, how to make it work for themselves. So
well, with food shortages and rationing, yeah, I think it all ties in. People were losing weight. They were hungry. So roll it into fashion and we'll force it and make it, desirable.
And then you've got the combined thing of men coming home. You have, like it's this, like World War I was this world altering experience because we'd never had a all out war like that. And the level of destruction and death was like never experienced before. Right. So the people were completely shook by it. So when men came home and had survived, like, we almost died, that was the, celebrate. We made it. We lived through an impossible situation and like, there's no tomorrow. So we're just going to celebrate. And so that freedom that was there and like, there's no consequences until we hit the stock market crash. And then in any time of economic uncertainty, we really fiercely reinforce gender norms. So now it's very much a get back in the kitchen, get back to your homes, go be wives, put on that silhouette again. You're going to be wearing the like 1930s little dresses and stuff. Slimmer, like the fashion's definitely changed and we've got a little more like shorter skirts and stuff like that, but very much the hourglass figurette or silhouette still. And so, like forcing women back into these really narrow confines. But of course, every time you give a little bit of freedom, it doesn't taste as good going back. So, and then we have World War II, like kissing right on the heels of that. And this time women are service people. They are enrolled in the army as actual service people. So they, of course, in World War II, they still weren't combat, but they did some really, really dangerous jobs. So there was obviously nursing, which was, sometimes could be quite dangerous, but that's the most common one we think of. But women drove ambulances. And also women did a lot of deliveries. So they would deliver materials. They would drive diplomats or people that needed to get from one point to another. They would be the people that drove because the men were needed for the battle. So any of that behind the scenes, like moving of supplies and people and stuff. So they flew airplanes over combat zones. So they would be flying over like hostile airspace, but they're just carrying mail or, like foods or whatever, right? Blankets. So that women served in really, really dangerous positions and were really active and important service members. Of course, women's uniforms were not parallel to
still
the male.
Those fucking skirts.
Yeah, they had to wear those cutesy little skirts and the cutesy little tailor jackets. And like, I don't think it mattered if it was winter. Doesn't matter if you're in France in December and you're out in a field somewhere, like you were still wearing your cute little skirt. And so women would quite often just out
Yeah.
of necessity and practicality take men's uniforms because their uniforms
Good
were
on
not
them. They
built.
must
Yeah, like,
reprimanded
Yeah.
for that, no doubt. Eh?
right? Yeah. Well, and I mean, you think of the type of women that would have been serving. Like, I just think those women must have been epic. Like, they would have been so
Oh
cool to be
yeah.
like, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
going to drive an ambulance to the front lines and pick up injured soldiers under gunfire and
totally.
haul them back to the hospital.
Well, they were spies too, right? Like they were women.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. They did a lot of
Code crackers.
espionage. So what we see after World War II is once again, the men come back, they take up their jobs and positions on the home front, and they expect women to just go back to their kitchens again. And this is where we see that real societal shift. So there was the 1950s, like June Cleaver domesticity, like
Mhm.
fetishization of women at home, especially middle class white women, right? This like suburban housewife with the pearls and the little like,
Yeah.
Mhm.
cardigan, and blah blah blah.
Leave it to
Um,
Beaver. Like that's what that makes me
yeah,
think of. Yeah.
leave it to me exactly.
Yeah.
And then you think like, um, that they would wear that same silhouette, right? That was still the hourglass, like no corsets, but you've got the like belted skirts with the little like
Mhm.
little
Mhm.
dresses.
But they had girdles.
Yeah, they
So
did. I know
so
that's
they
right. So it was,
they were cinching in.
yeah, yeah, they were wearing, you know, supportive undergarments. They
Mhm.
had they they kept that stuff tight. But it didn't hold as well, right? As we know, right? So we have like by the 60s, women are wearing pants. You've got like, oh, there's so many pictures of Katharine
Yay!
Hepburn. Like she was
Yeah,
just an icon for like,
she's a trailblazer.
yeah,
Yeah.
you can't make me conform. So like even when she was, in the like 40s and 50s, she's wearing pants and in pictures she looks so cool. But you see those little ankle length, little culotte pedal pusher pants that women would wear. And I think of like, Greece, you think of the pink ladies in Greece,
Mhm.
where they've got this like rebellious.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
this is where we see the decline of bulky, heavy, voluminous skirts and pants and clothing. I have two dogs coming in to say hi to me and are maybe going to knock over equipment.
I
Sorry.
always think about this iconic picture of Frida Kahlo. She's 18 and it's a family portrait. So her
Mhm.
parents, or her siblings and whatnot, their sisters are there. And she comes out for the portrait wearing a man's wool suit.
Yeah.
And I love this image of her because she's just 18 and she's like, I'm sticking it to the
Yeah.
man here. I'm not
Yeah.
wearing a
Not doing.
dress.
I know the like women who refuse to conform. They're so awesome. So that was
Yeah.
one of the pictures I wanted to show you. There was, I'm going to see if I can find her name. Mary Edwards Walker in 1870. So this picture of her in a full man suit with like, that long greatcoat that would go down to about the knees, that was
Mhm.
sort of double breasted and buttoned. And she's got
Yeah.
her hand like in between the jacket, the way the men would wear, like in the
Mhm.
breast pocket, the way that all those
Nice.
generals pose.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she's standing there, she's got her hair short, and she was a freaking army surgeon. And I'm like, Queen, you were killing it ahead of your
Mhm.
time. And she gets arrested multiple times for being a woman wearing men's clothing. Like, so it was a criminal offense. We need to do more paying attention
Well,
to Mary Edwards
Isn't that
Walker. Maybe she
insane that it
deserves her
can
own
a
episode.
criminal offense? Like
mhm.
that's
I know.
so insane.
Well, and we still like up until the 80s, like one of the things at the Stonewall riot for gay and transgendered men is that like they would ask to see your undergarments because they would want to know like, are you wearing ladies' underwear?
Yeah.
Or like for trans women that would be dressed in women's clothing, that was a criminal offense. You could be imprisoned for like wearing the wrong clothing. So it goes both ways. Like when men are
Mm.
not allowed to wear women's clothing, women
Mhm.
aren't allowed to wear men's clothing. It's such a like weird gender policing.
Mhm.
Present the way we want you to,
Yeah.
not the way like who's it hurting, right? Like who's it hurting?
Mhm.
It's such a weird, but
Nobody.
still,
Control.
yeah. So okay, so pants. We love us some pants.
Mhm.
So by the 1960s, pretty good. The other thing was that pants could be used for women to disguise themselves as men. So not necessarily in a transgender fashion, but like, escaping enslaved people. If you were a female, it was much easier. Like, again, you have those big heavy skirts. If you're trying to get any distance away from the plantation, or where you were enslaved, it wasn't always plantations, right? Wherever you were enslaved, wearing men's clothing would have got you a lot farther. And if they are out on the hunt for a female,
Yeah,
it's a
absolutely.
good disguise. Yeah. Women would use men's clothing, pants in particular, and men's jackets as, as a statement or for practicality or for protection. So this is where we get to my favorite little subtopic of the fashion police, which is pockets. Guys, I care so
Pockets.
deeply about pockets.
Love
Me
pockets.
too.
I know.
When I
Pockets are
find
so
an
important.
outfit that I love and then I slip my hands in and there's pockets, I'm like, oh, pockets. Now I'm going to buy this.
I know. Everywhere. Like whenever any woman, I don't care if you've ever met them or not, if you pass her and you're like, nice dress, and she'll be like, pockets. Like she will right away be like,
Totally.
it's got pockets.
Yeah.
It's
I
like-
always say that to people. They're like, nice outfit. And I'm like, yeah, and it's got pockets. And they're like,
I know,
what?
right?
That's awesome.
That's the first thing. A skirt or a dress with pockets. So
I
exciting.
know. Insane.
So pockets are like a super great microcosm of the gendered policing of fashion, right? Because pockets were universal, like 1700s. Basically, you have a sack that was tied under your clothing, and they were sort of flat little bags, and you could have either a center one or you could have one on either hip, right? So they would come in kind of pairs, or you'd have a singular one that would go right at your kind of waist down your front. But they were big. They were like from 12 to 20 inches. They were like these big bags that you would carry under your pants. And now this is where men's fashion, actually the like style and fashion of the day, quickly became difficult for them to have really big pockets, because they would wear the style. And we're talking like the 1600s, like, before they would wear this kind of big, loose, bloomy pants. And then when they start to get to the slim trouser leg, or especially like if you look at the Louis XIV court where they would wear the breeches, right? Like the little tight, then they ain't room for pockets in there, right? So men's fashion initially dictated the necessity of like removing those big bags underneath, and they would get tailored, sewn in pockets into their jacket. And when they were wearing the breeches, obviously, I don't think there's any room for pockets in there, but in like trousers, they could have pockets in their pants. And so that was like starting in the 1600s. Men started to get tailored, structured pockets in their clothing as a normal everyday thing. And they were large enough to be functional, and they had multiples of them. So they would have an interior pocket. They would have the external jacket pockets. They would have pockets in their pants. So they would have 5, 6, 7, 8 pockets on any given outfit. So they could carry a variety of things. And you think about what men would have been carrying at the time, because they don't have purses. So men would have been carrying, you've got your pipe and your tobacco, and then you've got your money for sure, but then you've got maybe your spectacles or your monocle, you've got matches, you would have a pocket knife, would have been a really standard thing to have. And sometimes you want to have your newspaper with you, all of these things, and like notebooks and pencils they would have been carrying. You needed some pockets, right? That's quite a bit of stuff that they couldn't have been just
Yeah, and it'd be mostly coin too, right? That they'd be carrying.
Exactly. Heavy. Yeah, it wouldn't have been bills. It would have been, heavy coins. Yeah, men needed pockets. So women at the time, I personally think, had the advantage because we had those big layered skirts. We would keep wearing our pockets tied, they would just be tied at our waist, a separate garment, and you just had slits cut into the side of your skirt over your pocket, and you could reach in and access those bags that were attached to your hips and store your things in. So the big voluminous skirts hid those pockets, and it was very
so much in those.
Weird.
Oh my God, could you imagine? Like you can carry the kitchen sink in that thing, right? Just like
you totally could.
I look at what Scarlett carries in her purse. No, like the purse queens, right? You've got your lip balm, you've got your whatever menstrual stuff you have. You've got to make sure that you have snacks. You've got to make sure that you've got whatever tissues and
perfume,
all of it,
all the things.
Yeah, you've got to smell. Yeah, probably a very smelly time. So having perfume on you would have been very important.
Yeah.
Now I was just going off the top of my head, so I stopped reading. Oh, so like early 1800s, the dress silhouette changes. So think Jane Austen. We've got those high empire waists and those very slim sort of drop down skirts. All of a sudden, you don't have a whole lot of fabric to hide your pocket. And also the fabric tended to be linen, muslin, lighter, so they would show the silhouette. If you sat down or were moving, walking around, you could see the pocket. So at this point, we don't have built-in pockets for women, but the pocket basically switched to an external bag, which they called a reticule. So a reticule is basically a purse, but it was like a drawstring sack that they would sort of sling over their wrist and carry.
Right.
And they were decorated and embroidered in beautiful little bags. And so now we have an external purse and internal pockets as options for women, even though like high society fashion, you would have needed to have, you
It's
wouldn't
a
have worn
lot
your
of
pockets.
a lot of work just to avoid a pocket.
Yeah. Well,
You know?
and they have sort of a duplicate job, right? And it's not practical. Like just get,
Yeah.
yeah,
Just get it
just
over
get,
with. Just give them a fucking pocket.
give them a pocket. Then, of course, fashion changes. Dresses get bigger again. And so they start sewing in pockets. They start giving women like sewn in pockets, but they're trying to disguise it. So now we've got crinoline or hoop skirts that are replacing it. So instead of having layers and layers of fabric, they've got these kind of bunting or whatever underneath to make a nice big skirt silhouette, but it's smooth now. So now you don't have layers of skirts that you can hide a pocket in. You've got these smoothed out, rounded fabrics that you
Right.
no longer can just like tuck a pocket in. So it became harder. So they would build in pockets for women. So one of the ones I thought was really funny was that seamstresses would put a pocket under the bustle in the back. So you could like stuff things under. It's like your bustle's gotten bigger by the end of the evening, Matt. What's going on? And just like stuff it. It's my winter jacket in there. I've got just
Went
shoving
shopping
stuff.
today.
And it also started to have different like creativity in pockets. So they would have like tiny little pockets sewn into your corset or into your belt to like just hold your dance tickets or to be able to hold like, like your gloves or something small, like a little handkerchief. But we see that like there were articles in like mid 1800s where women were complaining about seamstresses hiding the bloody pockets. So they're like trying so hard to hide them in the clothing that sometimes they're putting them behind their back or something. And they're like, I can't, I'm sitting in my carriage and I'm trying to get my money and I'm sitting on it and I have no, she's like, I can't get to the pocket or they're so well disguised you can't find them at all, right? You're like, I don't know, is there a pocket in this bloody thing? And so they were just like super creative design, but like I can't access it, not practical, right?
Not quite functionable.
Yeah. And so they see in home sewing manuals that it's like not quite clear because they were usually manuals for the servants on like sewing, like how to sew these pockets, like even into the mid and late 1800s, how to sew these waist tie pockets again. But the assumption is they were probably sewing them for themselves, but also for the mistress of the house. That would have been one of their jobs. So I personally think, I bet when they're home, when you're not wearing your finery out to an event, you're wearing a day dress at home that's a little bit practical. Those old school heavy duty pockets were super functional, super practical, and would have been really useful. So they're also, so when we talked about the rational dress reform. So the women that embraced rational dress were called a new woman. And so we see new women, they would have like these sturdy suits. And one of the big focus was pockets, right? So they would have these jackets with pockets in the front. Their little pants and bloomers would have pockets. It was one of their really big mandatory requirements. And it was about the democratization of being able to have stuff, access to money and access to like supplies, because the understanding was men had to operate and function business wise out in the world. So they had to have all these requirements. Whereas women, you need your kerchief, you need whatever things for your children, that would be more home front, right? So you don't need to go out in the world with your pockets. Pockets were useful at home in a home space where you would keep, toys that your kid needs or an extra blanket or something that you would keep in your pockets and you didn't need to take them out in the world. So
freedom.
So pockets were embraced by the new women, but of course we talked about how their fashion trend didn't actually hold or stick, right? So even though they did actually pioneer access to pockets, it didn't stick.
Well,
So
they poo-pooed those bloomers off the bat as
I
well.
know,
So,
right?
got to
Oh my
take
God, we
a
should bring
second
back the
kick at the
bloomer.
can for these things. Yeah. No, let's
Bloomers are
not.
pretty cute. They're pretty cute.
Like Scarlett, but you're gonna be rocking bloomers, Dad. You'll be trotting around like going for it. So Charlotte Perkins Gilman, who I don't know if you guys have ever heard of, she wrote a short story called The Yellow Wallpaper, which I should probably do an episode on that all on its own. The Yellow Wallpaper is about a woman who basically has postpartum depression and basically locked in her house because she's depressed and they keep telling her she needs to rest and she's just going stir crazy until she locks herself up in her room and she goes insane staring at the yellow wallpaper. It's a very wild, but it's very feminist kind of forward story. And I think it was written in the 1920s, The Yellow Wallpaper. Really, really good story. She wrote a little short excerpt about If I Were a Man. And it's in The Yellow Wallpaper and Other Stories is the collection of this woman's writing. So Charlotte Perkins Gilman, if that's the name, she wrote If I Were a Man. And what it was basically a fictional story of a woman who is married and one day decides to put on her husband's clothing and go out in the world like a man. And one of the first things she notices is that she's got this abundant of pockets and she's like, oh my God, ease of access. They are readily accessible. I can find them and I can get things in them. And then she realizes she has access to money. And she's like, oh my God, the freedom and agency I have just being able to buy my own food, pay my own cab, have access to finances and freedom. And just like wearing men's clothing allowed her to be in the world in this whole other way.
I wonder how many women did that, like rebellious women actually dressed up in their husband's clothes if their husband had gone away and went out for, a night on the town. I mean, I think it happened. I like to think that it happened. That would be, I think I would have done something like that.
Yeah. Well, even
Totally.
even if you're not trying to make a political statement, if
Just for freedom.
you were,
Yeah.
if you were just like needed to do chores around the house.
Well,
And
yeah,
like
there's that
my husband
too.
has an old pair of trousers and I'm not going out in public, I would absolutely just put on. I mean, we know a lot of the like farming women wore pants all the time because it was
Yeah.
like way easier. Obviously like if they have company coming over, they put on their dresses. So the idea of dressing up like a man. So this was part of the suffragette movement's access to an ability to interact with the world without a man's support, right? Like pockets allowed women to be out in the world without needing men to guide us, especially because we could have our own money. But the other thing that I thought was so brilliant was that one of the ideas that women, their skirts were a barrier to their skin. And so like not being able to you couldn't stand with your hands in your pockets. That was very inappropriate for women, even if you did have pockets in your skirts, because the belief was that you were touching yourself.
Yeah. You weren't allowed to touch yourself.
Wow.
Don't touch yourself,
Brutal.
ladies. None of that business. Also, don't have your hands in your pocket because men need to have access to your hands. They need to be able to hold your hand and assist you into your carriage or kiss the back of your hand in a gentlemanly fashion. So they needed access to your person, and hiding your hands was a masculine controlled maneuver. So if you stood with your hands in your pockets, you were removing agency and access to men. So that pockets had a symbolic idea of independence just by the very nature of like sticking your hand in your pocket. Like you might be touching yourself, and even worse, I'm not touching you. How terrible.
Wouldn't want to touch yourself.
Meanwhile, men have their hands in their pocket all the time playing pocket pool.
I know. Adjust to the left, adjust to the right, adjust to the left, adjust to the right. You're like, just leave the boys alone, guys.
No wonder they think women would be doing it.
Yeah, I know. They're like, I can't stop playing with myself.
Talk about projecting, eh?
Right?
Yeah.
Never mind that it's actually a little more awkward for us to actually reach, but standing on a street
and women
corner.
might go blind if they've touched themselves, right? In a sexual way, they might go blind or become barren. So they best not be doing that.
Yeah.
Or just get hysterical.
We might, then we're gonna go get treated with
for hysteria. Yeah. They're not Zab's treatments.
So pockets were also
Zab's got a little side hustle going right now.
Do you guys like to come and get a treatment? I'll give you a treatment.
hysterical woman's
Oh my
retreat.
God.
That would be so good.
She's
Oh
hanging
my
a new
God.
shingle.
Yeah, exactly. I know what to do.
So pockets were also subversive. It's very interesting that pockets have always, for women specifically, right? Pockets have always been associated with rebellion to some degree. So during the witch burning stages, women would not wear pockets because women with pockets would be searched for herbs, potions, little trinkets that you might be casting curses. You could be accused of being a witch depending on what you had in your pockets. So women would try to prove their innocence by not having pockets so that they didn't have, like, they didn't get accused of being a witch.
Wow,
Mhm.
that's
My
just
dog just moved my camera.
it's just so bizarre. Like it's hard to imagine that pockets can hold that much meaning, you know?
Power.
I mean, it makes
Yeah.
sense,
Right?
but it's
I
just
know, it's
such a
wild.
small thing, right? It's such a small thing with such a
Mhm.
massive
Yeah.
impact. Pretty
Yeah, you
wild.
don't think
No.
about it.
No, they're taken for granted for sure.
Like women's clothes still don't really have parity in pockets, right? We have these tiny little silhouettes of pockets and we don't really question it. But during the French Revolution, women's pockets were banned altogether. Women were not allowed to have clothing with pockets in them because they could be carrying bricks to hit like police officers with. They could be carrying revolutionary pamphlets or brochures that they would be using to spread the word of rebellion.
Wow.
And in the suffragette movement, of course, pockets, in that case, they embraced pockets. They deliberately used pockets as a way to carry rebellious items. So they're leaning into that idea. Like, yeah, this is how I carry.
Mhm.
Like, I'm going down to the square and I'm having a banner in my pocket and I'm going to hang it on the gate there and I'm going to say,
Mhm.
votes for women or something, right? And
Mhm.
Yeah. And I'm
so
going to pull it out of my
they were
pocket.
using them. Yeah, I got these pockets. It's a big 20-inch pocket.
See
I
that
can fit a
pocket?
lot of stuff in that pocket.
I got a banner in there.
Pocket. Yeah, can you imagine? Like, I got a sandwich and a bag
Yeah.
and a banner, and I got like
Yeah.
little flyers to hand out to the populace, my gloves. I got it all.
This here's a political pocket.
So yeah, and with women having the sleeker silhouettes as time progresses, what happens is, of course, we lose pockets. That's one of the first things that goes because it wrecks the silhouette. It wrecks the look of the clothing, right? So it's always a priority for women to look sleek as opposed to have practical clothing. We know this. So the other thing I wanted to touch on was service women. So, and I mean service women either in the military or like any woman in uniform, right? So we're talking policing, we're talking even just like some factories and stuff. They would make, like we saw in World War II, they'd make uniforms for women, but they were often designed to make her look pretty, not designed for her job, not so that she could function in her job well. So policewomen to this day, their uniforms have smaller pockets than their male counterparts. And the material is thinner. It's not as sturdy and also is a little more restrictive, right? So when they're doing a physical job and they need ease of movement, most women will opt to wear men's uniforms, even though they don't fit well. They are not designed for women's bodies, especially if you're curvy. They don't have that capacity. So you either have to go up a size and belt the hell out of it and roll up the ankles or whatever. And then that's a danger to your ability to function in the workplace. I was talking to one of my colleagues at school, and his daughter works in trades, and he said she can't buy women's pants for like carpentry pants because it's made out of thinner material. They will just rip.
Well, not only that, but
Wow.
they just don't fit your body.
There's some good workwear lines out there for women now, like Dovetail in Canada. I think they're Canadian.
Dovetail. Okay, I'm going to look that up.
The other thing is safety equipment, right? Safety equipment is not built for women's bodies, especially when you look at, like, I listened to this discussion from police women talking about bulletproof vests and military women, and they don't make bulletproof vests for women. Or I mean, they probably do now, but
Really?
it's not been easily accessible for these
It wasn't a
service
thing.
women, and so they are forced to wear men's. And so, like, again, if you're large breasted, you have to keep going up in size to get a bulletproof vest that will fit you, but then it's hanging off you and it's heavy and it's not It's not snug
Yeah.
and tight to your body the way it's supposed to fit to optimize your
Right.
protection. So there's still a lack of recognition of like women's bodies as, needing equal access to comfort, safety, respectability in the workplace. Like I don't need to be cute. I just need to be able to do my job, right? I need to be able to function,
Exactly.
and we can't seem to let go of the desire to make women symbols, right? To be able to covet
Yeah.
them and see their bodies. This is always the way. And I know like we women, we like to look cute, a lot of us. Okay, let's not look at what I'm wearing right now. But well, like I love dressing up, but I also really, really favor comfort. Being like sort of farmy girl and with my dogs and garden and stuff, most of the time I look like somebody who's strolled out of a pig slop. And that's because it's comfortable. I need baggy t-shirts.
Yeah.
I need like loose movable pants. I need breathable fabrics. I do not need a sleek silhouette. I need to be able to do my job. I need to be able to get my stuff done.
Mm.
So that's all she wrote. I could have gone down deep ones. Another one that I thought was super interesting was the zipper fly, like having a fly on
Zipper
women's
fly.
pants.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And they were like, because men would need a fly to go pee. Why do women need a fly on their pants? Right. And so this became kind of controversial as to whether or not women should have access to a fly.
Right.
So ridiculous. Hey?
Like that.
Yes.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, and then of course the answer is that too, like because we need the shapely silhouette, if you want one that fits at your waist, it has to be narrower, but then it's not going to pull down over your hips. So we need a fly, like it actually does. Like we need to be able to unbutton and do it if we want to be able to fit pants. But anyway, I know there were so many little pockets of things that I was like, oh, I could get lost, like undergarments.
Yeah.
Undergarments are a whole other
Fascinating.
thing.
Oh yeah, you could do a
Yeah.
podcast just on
Yeah, so-
bras, the evolution of bras.
I know.
You know.
Oh my gosh, you guys! Next
That's
episode.
for sure.
I know, and any number of those women that were like just like getting arrested out there, for
Trying to be comfortable.
daring to be comfortable. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to learn about the impacts of queer community on clothing as well.
Yeah. Yeah, this is, I know there was not many of the articles that I read dipped into people of color or queer. This is sort of an assumption of middle class, right? Middle to upper class. There was a little bit talking about like factory laborers and stuff like that, but there's obviously like a whole diversity of different issues, for, yeah, like you say, like the queer community, how the gender policing of clothing must have been so detrimental and just made also living your authentic self so difficult. Like it's hard enough to be in a society where you're not accepted and you're viewed as taboo, or you're viewed as like deranged, mentally ill, whatever, for not being heteronormative or whatever.
Well, just being anyone marginalized.
so-
There's not a lot of history that was documented about anyone marginalized. What we find when we start researching is all about upper class. That's, where the literature is. And that's sad because it would be interesting. I would find that extremely interesting to know what the peasants were doing.
Yeah, and it might be
and
worth
such, right?
yeah, dipping back in, because I'm sure the clothing of like enslaved people would be really interesting to look at too, because they would have, like on the one hand, they're a representation of the enslavers' wealth and power and status, right? So you want your enslaved people to look a certain part, but on the other hand, they need to do a job that's very physically demanding, and they need to be, like getting stuff done efficiently. They don't have time to be encumbered. So, and depending on what their role was, if they were working in the indigo plantations, like we talk about, like the blue jean industry, made possible by enslaved labor, in the indigo fields, making that indigo dye for the blue jeans. So, there's all sorts of correlation between marginalized people in society and the clothing that upper class people wear. That piece.
Yeah,
Anyway.
the ethics of fashion. Oh my God.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because like that's not
that's
even
just huge.
Yeah, environmental impact, all of it, right?
Ugh,
But I just wanted to look at
so
like
much.
how women's clothing has been sort of political and policed in,
Like
you know,
everything about women.
yeah, yeah. I know, and in so many
Yeah.
ways that we just don't, you know, we just assume like, oh, women's clothing has tiny pockets that are kind of useless. And we don't really question it because it's kind of always been that way. And we celebrate the access of pockets. We're like, oh my God, this has pockets. And we're so excited. But we don't think about why we don't have pockets. Like, why are we not allowed to have
Oh yeah, I
access
remember
to
growing up always
practical
thinking, why
storage?
doesn't my coat have a pocket? Why doesn't these pants have pockets? I spent my life wondering about that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was probably in my like mid to late 20s that I found out why we didn't have pockets. And I was like, what the hell? Like, you know, it's
Yeah.
so crazy the history of something so simple as a pocket. And it's crazy that
Mhm.
it continues to follow us to this day. I now buy most of my
Mhm.
clothes that, you know, that are made in Canada. And I find that
Mm.
pretty much all of them have really awesome pockets. But if I go to a mall
Yeah.
and buy
Yeah.
clothes,
Mhm.
most often they don't have pockets.
Mm. I'm super grateful for pants. Like, I cannot imagine living life without having pants. I'm
No.
not a skirt fan at all.
Yeah.
At all. Like, I'll wear them when it's hot. Yeah, pants are a game changer.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I can't imagine. Life
Yeah.
would be
Could you
so
imagine if you
limited.
just had to live in skirts all the time and do what you do?
No,
Well, not even
no.
just skirts, but
Outdoor
like
activity? No, thank you.
formal wear, like you're formal every day, all day long.
Yeah.
Like that would be
Mm-hmm.
horrible.
And it just
Yeah. Well,
automatically
sure,
restricts
lucky.
your life too. Even just going out of the house, if the expectation is this bar, like I can't, you know what? Like today, I did not succeed in putting on makeup. Like that was too high of a bar for me. Could you imagine if I had to do the hair and the ribbons and the lace and the petticoats and the, you know, corset and the way I'd just be like, okay, I'm just gonna stay in bed
Well,
today. I can't.
but we'd have all the time in the world to do it back then because we weren't allowed to do anything else.
That's
That
true.
was our focus. That's what we did.
I'd be
Yeah, they were
addicted to
You know?
ornaments.
them and just I'd be on the couch.
Yeah, exactly. Now, as women, we have to like prove ourselves over and over and over. So we're doing multitasking beyond reasons most days, right? Like we have so many balls in the air that, yeah, we need big pockets and quick light hairstyles and makeup so we can get it all done, right?
Oh yeah.
Because we're working. We're
All
working,
right.
girls. Mm-hmm.
So thank you guys for listening to my TED Talk / podcast episode about the politics of passion. And I just want to encourage anybody who's listening to us to please follow us on our socials. We're on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook at Murder of Crones. So give us a follow, like, and subscribe. And if you are able to download this on whatever podcast streaming service you have, that's great because if you download it, if you subscribe to us and put an automatic download, then it actually moves us up in the rate. So that would be great if you would do that.
And tell your
thanks for
friends.
tuning in.
If you enjoyed listening, tell your friends, please.
We'd also like to thank Denison Designs, our sponsors, for letting me use this beautiful space that I'm in. You can see this behind me. They're incredible interior designers. They also have a storefront in Castlegar, BC, and in Vancouver, BC, and they do all custom millwork. And if you want to check them out further, look them up at www.denisondesign.co.
Thank you, Denison.
Thank you.
All right.
Amazing.
Thank you both. Love ya. Bye.
Thank you guys.
Bye.